Hi everybody, I'm Tudor Morgan. I'm an expedition leader for Hurtigruten. It's so nice that you want to spend 20 minutes or so with me talking about Antarctica, a wonderful place where I actually lived and worked for 2.5 years. Just to give you a quick background information on myself, I was working for the British Antarctic Survey as a field guide for 2.5 years, living at Rotherham Station in Margaret Bay, south of the Antarctic Circle, and that was from 1994 to 97. I then took up a full-time job as Field Operations Manager for British Antarctic Survey. After that, I worked for the UK Antarctic Heritage Trust as Operations Manager, restoring historic huts in Antarctica. This is how I got to know Hurtigruten, because they were, and they still are, very supportive of the work of the Heritage Trust and other organisations. At this time, Hurtigruten hired me as a history lecturer as expedition staff on board the ships, but not on a full-time basis. I did spend a couple of years as operations manager for the International Association of Antarctica Tour Operators, also known as IATO. This organisation advocates and promotes the practice of safe and environmentally responsible travel to Antarctica. Today, I am the Director of Expedition Operations at Hurtigruten. But enough about me. I thought today would be appropriate to look back and give you a little bit of history of how this all started, this being the expedition side of the Hurtigruten business. So here you can see a picture of MS Nord-Norge. This is from the first Hurtigruten trip in Antarctica. It was in 2002, in November. And other than some trips done a long time ago off the Norwegian coast in the early days of tourism in Europe, this was the first time we had been away from Arctic waters doing an expedition like this. And the ship was a long way from home because we were in Antarctica and the other side of the world, as they say. If you look at the picture and at the funnel of the ship, you will see an unfamiliar logo for many of you. OFDS means Ofoten and Vesterals Damskipsskap. It wasn't until March 2006 the company took the name Hurtigruten. Even in the voyages along the Norwegian coast was called Hurtigruten since 1893. Anyway, let's start from the beginning of our Antarctic adventure. You see, the intention for us at the time was not to have an Antarctic operation. It was Chile and the Chilean fjords that Hurtigruten wanted to explore. The reason for this is that Chile has a long and thin coastline, which is much like the Norwegian one. So our top management at the time thought they could replicate what we were doing in Norway along the Chilean coast. But then they found out that some ships were going down to Antarctica from Chile, and they said, let's just hook on that and see how that goes. At the time, when MS Nord-Norge came down there and clonked its gangway onto the Ushuaia pier, there was nobody with that kind of vessel there. The average sized vessel were Russian research vessels that were rebuilt to take passengers that had about 40 to 60 guests. And then MS Nord-Norge comes with 390 guests. What we have steadily seen since then is that a lot of operators have increased their vessel size. But back in 2002, Nord-Norge was a freakishly large ship down there. But learning by doing was basically how we learned how to operate with that many passengers. During our first seasons, we did 2 landings a day and stretched the 6-hour slots that we had to whatever we could. And it was strictly 1 hour ashore. So Karen, John and others in the first expedition teams were standing in the water for 10 hours a day, more or less. So here's a picture of one of the first expedition teams in Antarctica. For those of you who are familiar with our expedition team, you'll see John Chardine to the left and Maurice van der Marle in the blue in the middle. And already back then, Hurtigruten knew that they should offer this type of expertise to the guests to enhance the experience. Maurice is a lecturer in history and anthropology, while John is an ornithologist. You can still meet them on board our ships in Antarctica today. If you look to the right of the photo, you will notice how we exited the vessel. The guests went through there, mind your head, look at the rubber thing on top, and we climbed down these precarious set of stairs. If there was just some wind, we had to cancel the landing. Today, even with surface winds of 20 to 25 meters per second, we can run actual landings because of our tender platforms are so much more rugged. And they can take much more wind conditions. So even if we have a very experienced expedition team that was there from the very beginning, we have evolved on some parts of the operation, like how we exit when we go ashore, for example. Here's another team photo from a little later on. To the left, you'll see Karen Strand and Rudolf Thoman and Maurice again. Back in those days, Rudolf and Maurice just did the Chilean coast because they weren't allowed to go to Antarctica. So we dropped them off in Puerto Williams, and then we went to Antarctica and picked them up again when we were on our way north to Puerto Montt. And in 2005, MS Nordkapp came into the game. And at one point, the first time she came down, the two ships actually met in Paradise Bay, and that was quite a thing then. I have to mention a very cute side note here. There was even a wedding between two people from the crew in Antarctica, one from each ship. The fellow proposed to his wife-to-be through the bow camera, and he had to stand there for half an hour with a sign, "Will you marry me?" before she even saw the proposal. Well, here they are in the boat, so you can guess what she answered. Then in 2016, MS Midnight Sol had its first season in Antarctica. And then, last year, we added the brand new hybrid-powered ship, MS Roald Amazon, to our fleet. This state-of-the-art vessel features new environmentally sustainable hybrid technology that reduces fuel consumption and shows the world that hybrid propulsion on large ships is possible. She became the first ship ever to be named in Antarctica, and Karen Strand was her godmother. So we named it in the ice with ice. And it was in a spectacular ceremony in a spectacular location, witnessed by the crew and guests from more than 20 countries. And she will be followed by her sister ship, MS Fridtjof Nansen, next season in Antarctica. In terms of the place itself, I mean Antarctica, it's absolutely spectacular. I don't know if any of you have been there, but if you have, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about in terms of wildlife and the scenery, the frozen landscapes, that it's completely isolated. The scenery is totally untouched, and there is an overwhelming presence of endlessness and ice. And the clouds, you could just go down there to be a cloud specialist. These clouds are actually venticular clouds, and they pile on top of each other, and on certain stormy days when the winds are really blowing aloft, you'll get this sort of effect. The ice is amazing. The sea ice. You wouldn't want to hit that one on the left-hand side. See how much ice there is below the water level. Every iceberg is different, and often they look rather similar, but occasionally you will get one with a beautiful arch like this. We see nature, red in tooth and claw, as they say. In this case, it's some birds. These amazing birds, giant birds called giant petrels, feeding on a penguin. And these sort of events are really special. They're once in a lifetime, often because you'll never see them again. Setting up a landing is not always very easy. These are fur seals, females at the height of the breeding season, around November and December. And this can be a minefield. We have to be extremely cautious and very careful how we set this up. At times, we have had to cancel landings due to way too dense first-hand situations with aggressive fur seals. This is in South Georgia in particular, but even in Antarctica in the late season, when they come further south, they more or less take over the area. And they can run quicker than any of us, and they bite. This is why we are super careful and take precautions when we set up these landing sites. It is so important that we understand that we are there on their terms and not ours. We are not forcing ourselves on these creatures because they are the inhabitants and we are just the visitors. On that picture, it looks like we are basically walking through a whole pod of them, but we actually managed to make a corridor which was there when we got there. But they sort of came in closer and closer. But for some reason, they didn't like to cross those cones. So they didn't cross over. They just sort of stayed in their place, even if they are territorial. The babies would go across though, and they're quite aggressive too, and the babies are born with teeth, and they sort of look at you and hiss. So no interaction with territorial animals. And the baby penguins. The chicks are incredible too. This is a day-old chick basically, and people ask when's the best time of year to go to Antarctica. If you really want to see chicks, you need to go late December, and then January onwards. Before then, you're into eggs and nest building, and you don't get to experience the chicks. But before Christmas, it's amazing too, because it's pristine and clean. And these guys, you see them in all the colonies. There are 2 species of skuas in Antarctica, and they basically feed on and rely on the penguin eggs and chicks for food. They feed on lots of different things, but that's their main food item. So most of the colonies have skuas involved and close by. And they nest a little bit later than the penguins, so that by the time their chicks are out, they've got nice and juicy penguin chicks to feed on. But nature cannot be cruel. It's not cruel, it's just the way it is. And we get some fantastic wildlife experiences in terms of mammals, sea mammals. We actually contribute to a citizen science programme where we record all sightings of leopard seals. These are also predators of penguins. About 50% of their diet is penguins. You'll see amazing whales as well, especially after Christmas. Mainly humpbacks, but other species as well. Fin whales and some orcas and minkies. These are feeding. We go to a particular bay that has a very high concentration of krill, and that just brings the humpbacks in to feed. We photograph the tails of the whales, and this is another citizen science project we have where we send the photographs into Happy Whale, that's what it's called, and they are identified like fingerprints, and we get a record. If it's been seen before and if it's seen again, you can continue to track your animal in a sense and see where it's been. And sometimes these events happen. We don't prefer to have events, but it does happen. The scenario here is we will come back from a hike to go back to the ship, but in the meantime at the landing site, the young elephant seals have all slid up on the bags because they love rubber bags. They just lay down on the bags for some reason. Then a group of king penguins comes up. It looks like we're breaking every rule in the book here, but we're not. The seals and penguins are in control. The way Antarctica is governed is a 2-step process that I'd like to talk you through. IATO is us in Hurtigruten. We are a member of IATO. So if anybody thinks that we are being imposed guidelines on or imposed rules and regulations on by IATO, then think again. That is not the case. We have been and we are a very active participant in IATO. We love to be part of this discussion and be part of the rules and the guidelines. So it doesn't help to blame IATO for whatever we don't like, because we are the ones who've decided it. IATO has been here since 1991, and they advocated for and adopted the environmental protocol for the treaty. And this is sort of the bottom layer of everything. This is where Antarctica is governed, through the Antarctic Treaty. And the treaty has 54 or so signatory nations. For Norway, the upholder of the treaty, or sort of police for the treaty in Norway, is the Norwegian Polar Institute. They also give us our operational permits every year. Whatever is decided in the treaty in terms of rules and regulations, it is the law for us. Then on top of that, IATO, which is our industry organisation, has operating guidelines in terms of what the treaty wants us to do, and also another layer that we put onto ourselves, which is even more strict to a certain degree, that the treaty will outline to us. So we're trying to uphold the highest of standards towards protection of the wildlife and to the environment in Antarctica. That is why IATO is so important to us and to be active in, and for our ticket to operate in Antarctica. So, in this final section, I just wanted to go through a few changes that we've seen over the years that we've been active in Antarctica. If you think about it, there are a lot of penguins down there today that just started to breed when we were there 17 years ago. Because that's not particularly long lifespan for a penguin. It's getting there, but there are probably a few that are still there. But still, we can see some changes. This is data from IATO, and it shows visits in Antarctica from the early days, from 1965, when the first ships that started going there. Then there is a really sharp increase starting in about the late 80s, with some ups and downs, including the big decline during 2008, the big recession. But it's picked up a lot and recovered, as you can see. The blue is landed guests each year. We've also seen climate change in Antarctica. Admittedly, it's quite hard to see changes in big lots of ice. There is so much thermal inertia in the ice. that it's so hard to see the changes over this time period. But we are seeing that in the springtime there is a lot more snow. And in general, the science behind this is that it warmed up in Antarctica a bit now and the air becomes moister. So you get less of a polar desert and more precipitation. You get more snow and rain. So it can snow more in the wintertime. And what happens is that penguins, and this is in mid-December, the penguins are still waiting to lay eggs, and they don't lay eggs normally on snow because it's a bad idea. So they wait until the snow melts. But if you have a lot of snow, it takes a lot of time and it can delay them so much they can't bring their chicks off before the winter comes in April of the next year. This is an image John Chardine took before he joined Hurtigruten in 1997 at Gold Harbour in South Georgia. And I want you to take a look at that hill. That green hill, more or less, in the upper centre of the picture, and the glacier behind it. And this is just about 10 years later in 2008. Look behind, and there you'll see that how much the ice has melted. It's really receded very quickly. And it's in a very short period of time. Over the time we've been visiting, you wouldn't know it to look at it from this picture, but this is a picture of Adelie penguins. And these colonies have declined by around 10,000 to 4,000 pairs since we've been going there. And it's not because of us. Adelie penguins on the west side of the Antarctic Peninsula don't really like the warming. And they are basically moving to different places that will suit them more. Mainly places better for krill. And also another krill predator, the chinstrap penguin. We've noticed differences in this particular colony at Half Moon Island as well. And again, the science behind this is there. And so our observations support what we know from monitoring that's been going on. Chinstrap penguins are declining. The flip side of that is the gentoo penguins, which are much more generalists, eating fish as well as krill. And they don't mind warmer conditions. They're flourishing on the western side of the peninsula, and they're moving south as well. So it's very typical to see lots of gentoo penguins on one of our voyages. This is for Antarctica nerds, but this is the fuselage of a single otter plane that sat behind the hangar at Deception Island. And the story goes that apparently there was a threat that an American collector was going to go there and take it. But the British removed it and took it back to the UK for restoration, so it's not at Deception Island anymore. In terms of the historical structures down there, this is one of the buildings on Deception Island, and when they had an eruption in the late 60s, one of the flows went right through this area here in the middle. Luckily, there was nobody sitting there at the time. The environment here is very tough on these buildings, so you can see today that part of the building has completely collapsed. And if you look at the end here as well, you can see that the roof has been completely blown off. That's before and after, and that's about a 15-year span between the two pictures. So a lot of the artifacts are basically entropy in taking hold of basically becoming an industrial archaeological site. There is one measure taking place to preserve the memory of these places, which has been done in South Georgia as well. It's to do 3D modelling photography so that it can preserve the look of how it was for the future. As far as I've heard, that's the plan for Deception and other historic sites as well. Because this is a 1912 Norwegian whaling station and a historic site, we're not allowed to dig swimming pools or bathing pools here anymore. These pools were filled with warm water and it was very pleasant. This is what we used to do. But now we do a polar plunge and swimming from the beaches. And yes, the water is very cold. I think this represents to me, it's an image of Half Moon Island, represents a very bright future for us and the companies that are operating in Antarctica. A lot has to do with the Antarctic Treaty and IATO, and let's hope that we do it in a sustainable way and into the distant future. We can't wait to explore Antarctica again. Our Antarctica season begins at the end of the year in October, wherein it's summer in the Southern Hemisphere and lasts through to March in 2021. If you'd like to join us, you can read more about our exciting voyages and see special offers at Hurtigruten.com. And we look forward to welcoming you on a cruise very soon. Seeing is believing. Thank you. Thank you all for listening. Hope you all enjoyed it. Great to be able to share Antarctica with you. Thank you for your questions that you've been sending through on Instagram and Facebook. Really good to have those and that feedback. Unfortunately, we can't answer all of them, but I've grouped them into different subject matter, and we'll try and get as many as possible as answered. Okay, so we received lots of questions on climate change and weather and my personal involvement in Antarctica and how dramatic is climate change and how long have I spent in Antarctica and have I seen it. So I've spent more time in Antarctica than I can count, but if you add it all up in terms of timing, then probably over 5 years of my life in total. And I just love it. You can never get enough. So be warned, when you come on a voyage with us, it may not just be the one voyage. It's very addictive. The Antarctic Peninsula, in terms of warming, it is a warming hotspot, and the average temperatures have risen over by a couple of degrees in the last 20 years. In the summer months, it can rain, believe it or not, and last season, in fact, the highest temperature was recorded in Antarctica, and that was 18.3 degrees Celsius. The inland ice cap, on average, can be up to 2.2 kilometers thick. And when you spend a lot of time in Antarctica over the years, which I have, you do see changes. You see a lot of changes, you see glaciers receding, and you also see how different species have adapted to the warmer summer temperatures. So climate change is definitely evident in Antarctica. Okay, also thank you very much for your questions regarding wildlife. Things like, can you touch penguins? What type of whales can you see? And when were the last sledge dogs in Antarctica? Everything we do in Antarctica is heavily regulated. Everything we have to do has to have a minimal impact on the environment. The Antarctic Treaty, and through the guidelines from the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators, IATO, through those we're very respectful of visiting Antarctica and protecting nature. We carefully manage landing sites, including carrying emergency equipment ashore in case of shore stranding, and that includes shelters, blankets and water. We also have set minimum distances that you can go from wildlife. So for example, a minimum distance of 5 meters from penguins, which means you can't touch them. If an animal approaches you and you are in control of the interaction, then we recommend just standing still and not moving. The penguin chicks, particularly later in the season, in February, can be incredibly inquisitive and they can walk up to you. But as long as they are in control, that is okay. Depending on the voyage and the time of year, we will see likely to see lots of penguins and seals, but you will also see lots of whales. The most common species of whales are humpbacks, minkies and fin, but you also may see orca. The question about sledge dogs, as part of the Antarctic Treaty guidelines, the last dogs were removed from Antarctica because they were counted as alien species in March 1994. These ones were rehomed in Arctic Canada. So they did move from Antarctica. Today, there are no dogs in Antarctica. We also had lots of questions regarding travel plans. Do you need visas? What do you need to bring? Is there any prerequisites? But the most important thing is to come on an expedition with us to Antarctica, you need to be physically fit. And we will ask you to do a medical examination before you come to get your doctor to show that you are fit to travel. You don't need a visa for Antarctica, but you may need a visa for the gateway countries of Argentina and Chile, depending on your nationality. So you need to check that and make sure you have those in place if needed. We also ask you to bring a sense of humour. We ask you to be as flexible and positive as possible. We are on an expedition and things can change. There are certain things that we can control. There are certain things that we cannot, like the weather. The environment and the weather control what we do. So if it's unsafe for us to do a particular operation, we won't do it. We will look at plan B, plan C, plan D. So the aim is to get us in the best place at the right time. And that's the role of the expedition leader, working with the captain and the team to get the ship in the best place at the right time to give you the best experience possible when conditions allow. In terms of clothing, we recommend bringing lots of layers, thermals, shirts, sweaters, waterproof outer layers, and then that really gives you the options to be adaptable for the conditions. So bring lots of different layers. You can layer up, stay warm, be comfortable. We had questions about how do you get involved in the research program? So, in terms of the science we do. So the goal of our research program is on one hand to support the scientific community by collecting data for them. On the other hand is to get you involved in the research and participating in projects, but also interacting with our guest scientists. So when you're on board, if you're interested, you get involved. It's your choice. So if you're into it, fantastic. We will get you involved, no problem at all. We had a question, are there people living in Antarctica? Nobody is actually living in Antarctica. There are no Antarcticans. There's not a resident human population, but there are numerous research stations where people stay now on average, if they overwinter, for 18 months. So a summer, a winter and a summer. Back when I started, I did 2 winters and 3 summers on the trot, but that was acceptable then. It's not so much now. The winter population of Antarctica, in terms of people at research stations, is in the region of about 1,000 people. The summer months, the numbers do swell with more scientists, support staff, running projects, and that can go up to around 5,000 people. On some voyages, we are lucky enough to visit some research stations, but that's not always. But on some, we're lucky enough to be able to get access to them, which is also a good treat. We really look forward to seeing you on board one of our expedition vessels in Antarctica, whether it be MS Fram, MS Roald Amundsen, or MS Fridtjof Nansen. And remember, every voyage is unique. Whatever time of year you come, you will see different things. So there's no best time to go. It depends what you want, whether it's the clean end of winter, snowy Antarctica, or the penguin chicks at the other end of the season, and everything else in between. But Antarctica is fantastic and it grips you. It's amazing. So you will enjoy it, and no voyage is like it. And please remember, we'll be doing webinars every week to different destinations. So please take the opportunity to tune in and ask us questions throughout the process and in the areas we sail, and find out more. Thank you very much for joining in. We'll see you again in a webinar or on another voyage. Thank you.